Folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with your daily dose of doom and gloom, and I got a thicker, heavier duty jacket on today because we've reached minus 20, minus 30 levels here up in the north, and that means I change into my Outdoor Survival Canada digs. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. Most of it's doomy, gloomy, bad news, but there is one little modicum of good news, and that's that our provincial government is finally fighting back against the nonsensical federal government's firearms legislations. There is no reason why us upstanding, tax-paying, law-abiding citizens should be disarmed and why we should have to pay for it. And that is why our provincial governments in Western Canada are fighting back, at least Saskatchewan and Alberta. These are the last two provinces with any common sense whatsoever, and I may not have to leave the country. I may. But anyways, let's get to all the crazy World War III economic collapse news. Now, you see this little chart right here? This is how we oversimplify things on this channel, but sometimes economists, they make things way more complicated than they need to be. There are a variety of different graphs and indicators that might predict this, maybe, sort of, kind of. This is the Holy Grail. In my personal opinion, this is the Shiller PE ratio. This shows you how overvalued the market is. This is really all you need in order to predict the upward or downward risk, okay? Whether we're risk on or risk off. We are definitely, absolutely frickin' risk off right now. That means I sold it all a long time ago. I'm not advising you to do that, but just hear me out. This is the baseline, okay? That's 15. That's where the market is, on average, valued, okay? That means it's trading 15 times price to earnings ratio. This is 30. This is where we are. Okay, this was the dot-com bubble. That was absolute insanity. Of course, that crashed all the way back to, you guessed it, the mean. Okay, and this, I think, was like 2008 financial crisis. Then you'll notice that the Fed, started their quantitative easing thing, right? And you'll notice that throughout the 20th century, there were a lot of deeper troughs. So this is just the mean. We can go way deeper in this. Barring there's no major World War III escalation, which, as we're going to talk about today, is highly unlikely, meaning that it's likely that the shit's going to hit the fan. Oh, I even said the whole word that time. We got a long way to go down. And the reason why this is so terrifying is because the S&P 500 is already down, like 20% this year or something crazy like that. We got the NASDAQ down 30% this year. We're not even halfway there. We're where we were right before the Great Depression, Black Tuesday. Now, I know people are going to jump into the comment section and say things like, forward PE ratio, forward earnings ratio, and they're going to get really technical and specific. But know this, everything has to regress to the mean. Someday, we're going back down to here. Okay, we are eventually absolutely going to go down to here. Because this is all like controlled for inflation. Okay, there's no way this goes up and up and up. The only way that goes up and up and up, I'd say, if we were living in an era where security was absolutely guaranteed, and maybe we just found some new planets to mine and we have the technology to get there, and so the value of things would be much better than it is. We would overvalue the markets because there'd be peace and security and prosperity guaranteed in the future. Let me tell you something, that's the farthest thing from what we got right now. Now, let's just jump right into the bad news. Now, I got my fire extinguisher here, and all my fire supplies, like these fireballs and fire suppressant agents and things of that nature, because we were just doing a video on fire. And the reason why we did that is because a few years ago, back in 2017, I did a video called The Fires of SHTF, where I predicted that fire, especially in a northern climate, especially in the winter, was going to be a major thing that you had to contend with post-disaster. Because you're talking about no electricity. You're talking about people need to keep themselves warm. You're talking about people need to cook their food. People need to illuminate the darkness. And for those reasons, people are going to be lighting fires in their homes. People with no natural survival skills whatsoever with a lot of fire in their hands. They're going to be burning whatever they can find. And that very thing is happening right now in Ukraine, where they're in sub-zero temperatures and it's a blackout across a large part of the country. They're trying to cook, they're trying to keep themselves warm, and they're trying to keep their homes well lit at night with no electricity, meaning they're using candles. In the last 24 hours, 109 fires, residential, across Ukraine, which is far in excess of the baseline, as well as 9 deaths. I'm not sure if that's all of Ukraine or if that's just Kiev. Regardless, emergency services have been overwhelmed, as you can appreciate. They're in a high-intensity conflict. I don't even know how the country's still functioning at all, to be honest. People are burning whatever they can to survive, and especially if you live in high-rise buildings, guys, you need to be careful, because you may be doing everything right, but all it takes is for one person who doesn't know what they're doing with their propane stove or their propane heater or the kerosene heater or their wood stove that they try to, install out the window of their apartment, or something to go wrong, a spilled candle or something like that. And, the whole building is going to go up in flames. So I just wanted to mention that, because that is a concern right now. We got a video in the works that we're doing with respect to that thing. Now, Russia, this is very important. On to Russia already. Yes, we're talking about World War III, because that is a serious thing. And I know a lot of people who have no stamina are exhausted of the issue, but I'm going to keep talking about what concerns me and what could keep me up at night if I wasn't prepared, okay? Trust me, I'll let you know when the World War III problem is eclipsed by other things. I'll be the first to let you know. Now, just want to check the mic here. Mic is in good position. All right. Russia has said that NATO is directly participating in the war. Up to this point, Russia has regarded NATO's involvement as indirect. So this is very important. What Sergei Lavrov has said. The USA is now committing to train up to 15,000 Ukrainian troops over the next 6 months, as well as Britain, Germany, Italy, Poland, and many other NATO members who are not only providing weapons, intelligence, support, mercenaries, this and that. Now they're going to be providing training. So Russia has now regarded this as no longer a proxy war. I think I said that just a couple days ago, that this is not a proxy war. A proxy war is when is exactly what you had in Vietnam, where you had the Viet Cong, who were being funded by the Chinese, I believe, and partially the Russians, and any other country that was communist at that time, fighting with the South Vietnamese and the Americans, who were fighting the North Vietnamese. Okay, it wasn't the Americans fighting the Chinese. That's not what we have right now. What we have right now is NATO effectively, in more ways than one, fighting the Russians. The Russians have finally explicitly stated that all these things, guys, are just moving us closer to a major conflict. Again, this has to be reiterated, because nobody is talking about the fact that Russia and the United States have walked away from the New START treaty. There is no longer any strategic arms control or oversight. That means that the nuclear weapons are rolling off the conveyor belts. And that's exactly what's happening. Russia has committed to bolstering its nuclear forces next year, as if they needed to, with 6,000 nukes on hand, ready and rearing to go. And we don't even know how many nukes the Chinese have, because we never had any sort of treaty with them. The next big piece of news, the U.S. contingent in Lithuania is now on high alert. So they've moved from a status of containment of Russia, meaning like more of a defensive posture, to combat readiness, so they can fight immediately. Now, my concern with this is, how does this translate to the DEFCON level? Because I talked about yesterday, you have all of those bombers at Engels Air Force Base, which is an unprecedented concentration of bombers loaded with, I think, 276 missiles waiting to partake. And then you have the bomber that was sent to China for the first time in history, a strategic, i.e. nuclear-capable bomber, which was sent to China. All of this posturing is putting NATO on notice. So when you move your troops to a state of combat readiness, and you're on the border with the Russians. Lithuania borders Russia, I do believe, if I know my geography correctly. Then you can bet that, or even if it borders Belarus, it doesn't matter. Close enough. Baltic states are right up against Russia. That means that translates into a DEFCON level rising. So this is in response, they say, due to incidents with respect to the Belarusian and Ukrainian border. Stuff going on there. They've been mining the border. They've been blowing bridges, blowing roads up for a long time. The USA does expect hostilities with Belarus to break out very soon. Latvia has also sealed the border with Russia. They blew up a footbridge not too long ago, which is kind of a symbolic thing, like I don't know what you would call it. I think it's at the junction between Belarus, Russia, and Latvia. It was like a walking bridge, so it wasn't at all like strategic. You could still like drive a tank right across this small little creek or river or whatever it is. But it was one of those things. It was supposed to be some sort of symbol of a temporary armistice, if you will. But regardless, Latvia has now declared a state of emergency on the border with Russia. So the Baltic states are on very high alert. Russia has demonstrated a concentration of bombers, which, if nothing else, is meant to be a clear indication to Western intelligence that their nuclear posture is now on a higher level of alert. Because Peter Pry told me this. He said one of the first things that we would do in order to flex or in order to show the other side that we're serious is we would start loading up our bombers. And coincidentally, the United States is going to be releasing its 6th generation stealth bomber, unveiling it next Friday, I believe. Next Friday, they're going to be unveiling that on December 6th. This is supposed to be one of the most advanced aircraft ever made. Now, Peter Pry also talked about how bombers nowadays are kind of the weakest of the triad, of the nuclear triad. The submarines are the most important. However, he talked about how the Poseidon nukes are actually trailing or trying to track the U.S. submarines that are at sea, so that in case a nuclear war broke out, the one leg of the triad that was supposed to be foolproof and that was supposed to be, because the Minuteman silos, they could possibly be taken out by Russian hypersonics. The bomber bases could be taken out before you even get the planes loaded. But the subs were supposed to be the thing that sealed the deal, that ensured that if everything else failed, we would be able to retaliate in a nuclear strike. But even that is called into question now with what is it called? Is it the Belgorod? The Belgorod submarine and its Poseidon nuclear missiles, which can generate 100 megaton tsunami and blow these submarines out of the water from a distance of, I think it's like 10,000 kilometers or something crazy like that. Nuclear-powered nuclear torpedo. Anyways, we're getting off topic. Let's get back to what's going on here. Olena Zelensky, the First Lady of Ukraine, has said that Ukrainians are ready to go without light and heat for 2 to 3 years. I wonder if she spoke to every Ukrainian. She said that 90% are ready to never give up. Now, I don't doubt this. I mean, you think about the Viet Cong, bringing them up again, and how they were willing to fight and die for their country. And there's going to be many people like that. However, I will say that I highly doubt that she is going to be experiencing the problems that many other of her fellow Ukrainians are going to be experiencing, like going without light and heat. I have a sneaking suspicion that she's going to be in one of the more privileged classes. But what do I know? Maybe she's going to be right there in the trenches, but I highly doubt it. Ukraine is preparing for total nationwide blackout. They continue to encourage any citizen with the means to do so to vacate the country just for a little bit. Stock up on food, water, clothes. There are 430 warm-up spots in a city of 3 million. That's in Kiev, according to Klitschko, the former UFC champion. Great fighter, by the way. Was he a boxer or a UFC? I don't know, but he won a lot. I remember looking at his record one day, and it was almost undefeated. Excellent fighter, but 430 warm-up spots in a city of 3 million, even if 1 million people have already vacated the city, is nowhere near enough. And in order to provide resources to those 430 spots, it's going to be very difficult when the war starts bearing down. Ukraine army is in a state of emergency. All of the reserves are being rerouted to Bakhmut. You know, this place in the Donbass along the trench line there where the Russians have been trying to break through for the longest time. Well, there's something about this region that the Ukrainians are very concerned about. The Ukrainian military command is moving the 80th, 81st, and 95th Airborne Brigade to the Donbass in the Bakhmut region. They're also moving the 65th Brigade and the 16th Battalion of the 58th Independent Motorized Brigade to this region. So we're talking about thousands of troops and reservists heading to this region. So I'm pretty sure they're worried that if the Russians are to break through in this region, then it's going to see the rapid collapse of the Ukrainian military. And I think the statistics I heard is that you only need 30% of your military to be destroyed, or 30% of your battalion or brigade to be destroyed before it's non-functional. That's just because, you have a certain amount of officers that are gone and you lose the chain of command. So, we're very close to potentially seeing either side potentially be, see significant losses, which may, turn the tide of the war for either side. And the reason why I say either side is because, it's not all sunshine and rainbows for the Russians right now. In fact, they are retreating or withdrawing, as the Russia bros would say, from a variety of different places. Now, on the topic of Ukraine, the embassies are receiving all these explosives, and I'm talking about the embassies throughout Europe. I'm talking about Hungary, the Netherlands, Poland, Croatia, Italy, Spain. They're receiving animal eyes, packages with flares in them, bombs, bloody sledgehammers was something that the Wagner Group sent to the European Union. So it's only a matter of time. The European Union and the European countries and NATO in general is trying to play this down, because in spite of the European Union designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, once any independent country slaps that label of terrorism on the Russians, they know that that has grave implications for their ability to trade with the Russians. And believe it or not, the Russians still have a lot of what European countries need in order to survive. France in particular is wholly dependent, or at least in a large part dependent, on Russian nuclear fuel. Russia controls 70% of the global nuclear fuel market. France is, I think, something to the like 90% dependent on their nuclear facilities, and they're looking at experiencing blackouts this year because 22 of those facilities, 22 of their 56 facilities, are currently being repaired. But I'm just guessing that has something to do with the fact that they get all their nuclear fuel from Russia. And it's a certain type of nuclear fuel that only the Russians have. Yes, we have lots of uranium here in Saskatchewan. I think we have the most uranium in the world. We got the most uranium and potash in Saskatchewan. And we got a lot of oil too. And we got a lot of wheat. So if there's a place to ride out the apocalypse and you have the industrial means to do so and to extract it all, Saskatchewan's the way to go. Saskatchewan is nuclear power and growing food with the potash, with the fertilizers. So, we are quintessential for the planet. Now, the Russians apparently are ready to abandon the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant in exchange for oil and gas transport, according to this Latvian-based news agency. Now, the Kremlin denies this, okay? This is according to a Latvian-based news agency who has consulted with someone they're calling a Kremlin insider. They claim that the Russians need to transit their oil and gas, which they do, through Ukraine to a variety of different European countries, including and not limited to Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Poland. Now, the reason why Ukraine hasn't turned off the taps already, which they clearly could, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. They could clearly cut off the taps anytime they want. The reason why they don't is because those countries rely on those resources in order to function. So part of the whole deal here is we'll help you out, but just don't turn off the taps to Russian oil and gas. So if Russia, however, abandons the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, there is no guarantee. I mean, for starters, if the Ukrainians were going to shut off access to the rest of Europe, they would have done it already. They haven't because they need the support of all of those countries, right? So they're never really going to do it anyways, because the only way so Russia in some way is fueling the countries that are supporting Ukraine by continuing to send oil and gas through this pipeline. But of course, they need to do it because they have, they got a budget to manage. So, but anyways, Russia has denied this. Dmitry Peskov has said that this is out of the question and has denied any sort of withdrawal from the nuclear power plant is underway. And according to Victoria Nuland's Institute for the Study of War, and I say that because I know a lot of you guys don't like this think tank. Anytime you hear about a think tank, you got to raise eyebrows, because think tanks are usually what the most elite in the world use to manipulate. We'll just leave it at that. Anyways, according to the Institute for the Study of War, Russia has withdrawn from certain parts of Zaporozhye and potentially might be withdrawing from the nuclear power plant. Russia continues to use decoy nuclear missiles. Yes, you heard right. Nuclear missiles without the actual nuclear warhead inside in order to exhaust Iranian air defense. So this is what they're doing now. They're taking all these tactical nuke missiles that they're not using. They're taking out the warhead, and they're using basically the dummy missile, if you will, to act as a decoy so that they can get their live ordnance through while this stuff is eating up the attention of Ukrainians and depleting Ukrainian air defense. Now, according to, you might have heard the rumblings that Biden has extended the offer to Putin to do peace talks, and this is just nonsense. Every few days, few weeks, a story like this comes out. Zelensky wants to negotiate, and then you realize you just do 5 minutes of digging, and you realize, oh, it's on the precondition that you leave the country altogether. I mean, these are just obligatory statements, so that if people are getting exhausted in their support of the war, then the administration can say, see, we tried. But there's no immediate plans to contact Vladimir Putin. And one of the conditions is a complete Russian withdrawal from the country. I mean, come on. This is just stupid. Not even worth me talking about. American analysts have decided to simulate a Tsar Bomba attack on Kiev. I'm not sure why. There's a video on YouTube. And it shows that if the Tsar Bomba, which is a 100 megaton nuclear warhead, the biggest, I believe, ever created, I think they're talking about the 100-pound version, or 100 megaton version, not the 50, but they might be talking about the 50. Either way, the results were, as you would expect, 2.5 million dead instantly with, I think, a diameter of 60-mile radius, or sorry, diameter, 30-mile radius, 60-mile diameter, completely destroyed. Okay, now Russia has partially withdrawn from the left bank of Kherson. People don't know why, but it could be that they are potentially getting ready to blow the dam. Now, either side, the Russians have more to lose from blowing the dam because it is in some way important for the electricity and water to Crimea. But if they have no other choice, they may just blow the dam. Or the Ukrainians may blow the dam, and that would flood out a good region. They're asking anybody within 15 kilometers of the river to leave. Now, that could be because that's artillery range from across the river. I don't know. Not a military guy. But just know that Russia is partially withdrawing from left bank of Kherson, and they're rerouting a lot of their troops, it appears, their trained, hardened troops, to the Donbass. So this is where the war will likely be decided. Now, let's talk about Germany. Germany has 2 days worth of ammo if a high-intensity conflict broke out today. Now, this was a very good article that I read about this, and I'm going to try to condense it into the key points for you guys. Ukraine is using the ammo faster than it can be replenished by NATO. That is, the industrial base does not exist anymore in order to manufacture the stuff as fast as we're using it. This is not World War II. And it amazes me because we're far more technologically advanced today than we were in World War II, and that's part of the problem. we're just too advanced. And globalization has unfortunately made it so that a lot of the components, including gunpowder, actually come from China. Okay, and in addition to that, all the wars that we've fought basically since World War II are counterinsurgency style asymmetrical operations. That is, we're not prepared to fight high-intensity wars that require a lot of ammunition. The Russians are shooting somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 to 70,000 artillery rounds every single day. The Ukrainians are using about 5 to 10,000, okay? And the Russians can sustain that somehow because they got the Chinese, they got the gunpowder, they got the brass, or the copper, all the things they need in order to make the shells. They have that stuff. Unfortunately, European nations do not. Asymmetrical wars don't require as much ammo, and that is why we're shortage right now. Shortages of tank shells, 155 millimeter rounds, stingers, javelins, harpoons, tomahawks, and medium-range multiple rocket launchers are all in incredibly short supply. And the problem is, even if we were to start manufacturing these en masse today, the problem won't be solved until 2025. And part of the reason that's complicating this is high energy prices, of course, because of the lack of Russian natural gas. We have inflation. We have supply chain bottlenecks with China. A lot of the materials still come from China. So you have that issue of, well, if we do, push the Chinese too much on the Taiwan Strait issue, then, they may just stop sending us the stuff that we need, the raw materials, in order to do this. And the raw materials cost is much higher, as well as a tight labor market. They just don't have the people who have the skills in order to do this kind of stuff. So I thought that was rather interesting and worth knowing that if a high-intensity conflict broke out today, we would be able to do nothing except launch nuclear weapons. Now, France, as I previously indicated, is looking at blackouts this winter due to 22 of its 56 nuclear reactors being down and being basically beholden to the Russians, who control 70% of the nuclear market. In fact, France has been accused of funding Russia by buying nuclear fuel because, France should just put itself in the dark for the sake of the Ukraine conflict, just because, their people should freeze and starve to death, I guess. If you guys didn't know, the Russians recently released a nuclear-powered icebreaker. And for anybody who thinks that the Arctic sea ice melting isn't a thing, you should ask yourself, why on earth are all of the countries who now are seeing ways that they can traverse this region, because all the ice is melting, why is this such a big issue up there in the Arctic? Well, it's because there's potentially a lot of resources up there, and it's now opening up. Okay, if the Arctic sea ice wasn't melting, there wouldn't be this scramble for the Arctic, which there is. And I just thought I'd mention that the Russians just unveiled their nuclear-powered icebreaker not too long ago. Now, the price cap, so the oil price cap. So the EU has agreed to $60, and Russia has said that it will not participate, as expected. They think that this sends the message to any country who may be on the fence with respect to whether or not they should do business with the West, that all states, without exception, to consider abandoning the mechanisms imposed by the West within its globalization systems. And this is because the rug can be pulled from underneath you at any time. So it doesn't inspire a lot of trust in the Western systems to know that at any time they could put a price cap on you, they could freeze your assets, they could sanction you. So, yeah, a lot of people, a lot of countries, I should say, BRICS-related countries are looking at this and saying, you know what? We'll see. Regardless, this hasn't had a huge impact on crude prices, probably because this was already priced in to a certain extent. But we're going to see how it actually plays out, because I don't think anybody really knows yet how this is going to affect the global oil markets. It's likely going to increase the price of oil, especially if Russia chooses not to send oil at these price cap levels to these countries. On the same day, interestingly, that this price cap is going to go into effect, this oil cap, I should say, The Russian Prime Minister is going to be having a video conference with the Premier of China. So not the presidents, but the guy underneath the presidents of either country are going to be meeting with each other. And that's definitely a flex. Now, this is a regular meeting, but I'm pretty sure they schedule it on that day to make a point. They're going to be talking about partnering on energy, industry, investment, transport, and military. So what we are seeing as we continue to fight this war, that we're pushing the Russians and the Chinese closer and closer together. And we can't even make the bullets that we need in order to fight this war. So anyways, I talked a little bit about the stock market at the beginning of this video, and I need to reiterate that myself personally, I've gotten the hell out a long time ago. And that's why I've been telling you guys about gold, even when it was back down there in the 1600s. Now it's back up in the 1800s. And you just need to know that there's a long way to the bottom. It's not a matter of if. There is no exception. There's that one thing in the market, that old idiom or whatever you want to call it, where everybody thinks that now is an exception to the rule. But it never is. Everything always regresses to the mean, and it's usually slow and painful, and people will continue to try to double down to win it back, just like the gambler's fallacy, and you're never going to win it back. And they also say here that stock market bottoms happen long after interest rate easing begins. So right now people are talking about a potential Fed pivot, slowing down in the interest rate easing. But according to the research that I've done, after the dot-com bubble in 2001, it took 645 days. After the dot-com easing, I should say. It took 645 days to hit the bottom. After the financial crisis of 2007, it took 538 days after the Fed started easing. So we got probably like 2 years of downward recessionary trending bear market style stuff that we have to wade through. We also have the forward PE ratio, which a lot of people reference, it makes no difference. I mean, the Schiller PE ratio is really, in my opinion, it's the golden indicator for what's going to happen. But if you want to look at the S&P forward PE ratio, right now it's at 17.5, between 17.5 and 19 last time I checked, and that typically bottoms out at 13. What else do we got? Massive layoffs at mainstream media. Some of you guys might like that. So we got massive layoffs at CNN, NBC, and ABC. As much as people might joke about that, that's not funny. When people are losing their jobs, that's bad for the entire market as a whole. We can snicker about it a bit for a little bit, but at the end of the day, everybody's going to be impacted, and it's not going to be good. So hopefully you made some decisions earlier in the year when we were talking about, for the last couple of years, when we were talking about the looming economic recession/depression. We have, at the same time, the United States committing quite possibly $3 billion in annual military aid, if this passes legislation, in military aid to Taiwan. Okay, that would make it the second highest recipient of foreign military financing. That's regular foreign military financing. That's $3 billion every single year now, okay, for the next 5 years or something like that. The second only to Israel. Now, of course, Ukraine has taken the cake this year, absolutely, with what is it? Probably close to $100 billion now with all the stuff we've sent. But that's going to include the U.S. sending directly from their stockpiles weapons to Taiwan. Of course, this is going to be incredibly provocative towards China, and it's likely not going to be good, but we got a lot of cool videos coming out for you this weekend. We're going to be checking out a survival shotgun, because this one is probably going to be banned last. That's a great thing about shotguns, is it's the last thing to go in any country. And, they'll take away some of the shells. They'll say, you can't have 4+1 or 5+1. You can't have a tube fed. You can only do single shot. But it's going to be the last thing to go. So, I figure, hey, in the famous words of Joe Biden, just send off 2 blasts and all the bad guys will go running, right? That's sarcasm, guys. Anyways, what else do we got coming? We got Nuclear War Survival Skills, one of the co-authors of this book, because the author, unfortunately, has passed away, but he's going to be releasing the first part of a video series. This guy is a wealth of information, so we're going to release that on Sunday, I believe. And we just got tons of stuff that we have planned. So the show must go on. You know, I see myself as the violin player on the Titanic, and people say, oh, you're building a new studio, but you're talking about SHTF happening every day. Yeah, the show must go on. That's just it. You can't just, I'm not just going to retreat into the wilderness yet. When I stop uploading, I think, unless I've died or something, then I think that's a sign that maybe, you should really start considering packing up and heading out into the wilderness. But the way I see it, we got to keep trying to push the envelope with this preparedness stuff. We got to keep trying to get more and more people prepared. And to be brutally honest, yes, you absolutely need to carpe diem. You need to maximize everything you can. If that means working 2 jobs right now, get your ass out there and work 2 jobs. If you're filling 8 hours of your day watching TV and sports, right now when you can go out and work for 2 hours and buy a 40-pound bag of rice that will feed you for 30 days, do you know how hard that is going to be to get that if the shit actually hits the fan? This is why people who come here from other countries, poor countries, they're work their ass off because they're so amazed that, you mean I can just have a job anytime I want? I can work more? Yeah, you can work 16 hours a day if you want. And I'm not saying you got to do that forever. All I'm saying is get it while the getting is good. Get it while the getting's good, okay? Because right now, it's 100 times easier. Like, ask those people in Ukraine right now how hard it is to get certain things that you need. It's 100 times more difficult. You can't grow food in a war zone, okay? You cannot do a lot of things that, we just take for granted. The ability to just get water out of the taps. You know how long it would take you to have to walk down to the river or drive down to the river or try to do all the labor that you would have to factor in to get water or grow food, and you can just go buy it from the store, and people are complaining about the dumbest shit. Oh no, I have to go into work and I can't work from home on my computer. You know what? I commend Elon Musk for putting the fire back under people's asses, because 2020 went to a lot of people's heads. This whole work from home thing, this whole, you're entitled to just get rich for doing less, and the whole Bitcoin craziness that convinced people that, yeah, you can just get blood from a stone. You can just, get something from nothing. No, you can't, unfortunately. But the good news is the grid is still up. So try this mental exercise. Pretend that the apocalypse just happened today. You have no running water. You have no electricity. You have no heat. You're really, really cold. And you're looking at your family who is starving. Okay? Oh, yes, and there's marauders banging down your door and they're trying to kill you. Okay, you got all those things in your mind. Now come back to right now. Right now seems pretty good by comparison, doesn't it? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.